Hello, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Metabolic Code clinical case review using the Metabolic Code report. I'm Libby Bricker, your moderator. I will facilitate the question and answer session at the end of Jim Laval's case, and without any further delay, I will hand the screen to him so he can begin. Jim?
Great, thanks, Libby. Tonight we're going to go over a gentleman that actually is type 1 diabetic and came into the practice just, not having energy, not feeling like he's got the same mental focus he should. 50-year-old, actually, yeah, 50-year-old. I think he just turned 50. And he really, he was just looking for, to kind of maximize his ability to manage his diabetes better. But you'll see he's got a lot of questions answered yes, so we're going to go through those, and then we're going to see what we're going to do for this gentleman. But classic case of actually he's a fairly well-controlled type 1 diabetic. So, does he have, diabetes? Yes. He's not insulin resistant or pre-diabetic. He is diabetic. He does have more than 1 or 2 glasses of alcohol a day. He does have a lot of chronic stress, owns 3 businesses, and is retired apparently, or is supposed to be retired, and feels the stress of that often. And then he does crave foods, and it's because if he tries to eat a lot of protein, his blood sugars go up. So he's really trying to figure out, one of the reasons he came to me, he's trying to figure out why his body's behaving the way it is in terms of his need for insulin when he's watching his carbohydrates and he's eating a higher protein diet. And his blood sugars are going up through the night. So we have to figure all that out. He does exercise actually quite regularly. He's a little overweight, but he's an ex-pro athlete. Taking medication, obviously, he's using 2 types of insulin. He takes an aspirin. He is on a statin medication. He is on other lipid-lowering medications. He is not on anything for an ACE inhibitor, which I was a little bit surprised. And then, if you look, symptom-wise, craves carbs, and then has that periodic energy crashes during the day, and he needs to use caffeine. He reported about 1,000 milligrams a day caffeine use based on coffee, energy drink, etc. intake. And then his memory was the big thing he was concerned with, because he just didn't seem like he was as sharp as he usually had been over the last 2 years. And then if you look here for, he gets dizzy on standing, he feels emotionally flat, his short-term memory is worse than it used to be, he has to take in more than 3 cups of coffee or other caffeinated beverages each day. Let's see what his blood pressure was. 123 over 81 with a pulse of 58, but he is a little bit acidic at 6.4. And then let's go to his adrenal high. If you take a look, he's feeling overcommitted, too much stress in his life, 50% or more calories after 5 p.m. Ability to exercise is down. He definitely sees a difference in his endurance and stamina, and he definitely is getting sick more frequently now. And then thyroid low, he has a couple, exhausted throughout the day, which could be his adrenals. It could be blood sugar, right? He's got poor blood sugar regulation. And he just feels exhausted from morning to night. And let's keep going. And he gets gassy and bloated easily after eating a meal. So, what diabetic do you know that isn't a little bit yeasty? He is on an H2 blocker currently, prescription. I don't think he had marked that up top, but he is on one. And if you look here, difficult for him getting over a bug. He said he'll hold on for weeks at a time. He does have some joint pain and discomfort, uses a fair amount of NSAIDs to help countermeasure that. And his sleep is only about 5 to 7 hours a night. and he tosses and turns, so that stress is really starting to affect him there. And the rest of the way, it's a lot of nose here. Wakes up to urinate, has a bit of a loss of stamina. It's one of his big complaints, along with the fact his memory isn't so good, and then his blood sugars aren't as managed as well as he would like to see them at night. So that's his questionnaire. Pretty uneventful for a type 1 diabetic, you know. I mean, and been type 1 for a while. I mean, he is trying to take care of himself. He does. He's responsible. He tests. He watches his diet, exercises. I mean, he's trying. Well, let's see what else he's got going on once we look at his labs. Okay. Let's see where his scores come out. So, you know, if you look, thyroid, adrenal, pancreas obviously comes up big. Not so much thyroid, but big for adrenals, and he reported a lot of stress, related response. And of course, pancreas. A lot of the kind of misunderstandings is type 1 diabetics, you still can make their insulin receptors work better. Then they just need less insulin. It's one of the biggest things that I've done over the years. I'm working with diabetics is, minimize their drug needs, because we know the more drugs diabetics take, the more adverse events they have. Do they need insulin? Of course they do. Do we need to keep their blood sugars down? Of course we do. But at the same time, we need to keep the insulin receptor active so that their need for more and more insulin is slowly titrated over many, many years of life, hopefully, versus in many cases, rapid and massive amounts of insulin that has to get used. Gut, immune, brain comes up pretty strong here as number 2. Cardiopulmonary number 3. Liver, lymph, kidney is kind of low, and testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone is kind of low. Interesting. Let's see what the report ends up picking up. So he's got a lot of risk. All right. And let's see where he's at. So his pH is acidic, and look at his sodium. The sodium's at 135, and his cortisol's holding its own. His DHEA isn't horrible. It's decent. It's not bad. Let's look at his thyroid hormones. T3 is okay, not great. His free T4 is good. TSH was good. Well, it looks to me like he's probably not converting great. I mean, the 3 is not bad. Could stand to be on the higher end of normal. And then pancreas. Fasting glucose of 190, not all that bad for somebody who's diabetic and having trouble managing at night, but we still like to be better. He's got a good hemoglobin A1C. Without a doubt, his IGF-1 is almost non-existent, so he's either been under stress for a long time, or he has got some kind of chronic infection, but it doesn't really present like he's got a chronic infection. He's diabetic. His potassium is trending low. His red blood cell magnesium is trending low, so he needs the RBC mag in order for his blood sugars to be improved, right? He's going to need a much bigger dose of magnesium. He's not really taking any right now, if I remember right. And, of course, his potassium's low, and we need to watch that. If you look here, look at his vitamin D, almost non-existent. That's not going to help him with his diabetes or complications. Not a lot of eosinophils. I mean, pretty amazing, right? Not too much going on there. His folate levels were, trending high normal. His homocysteine is way too high. So we know we're going to give him some methylated B vitamins. And then if you look here, look at his LDL particle number. I mean, 1175 now, but granted, he's on a statin. But with a few people that I see where the numbers are kind of that good, so, and I'm not advocating, statins, but, some people, they seem to work okay. Pulmonary was okay with the CO2. His blood pressure was okay. His red cell width is kind of trending low, just on that borderline of trending low. and his kidneys were just there, right? 67, less than 60 is the watermark, and I mean, he's gonna, why wouldn't he, right? He's been type 1 diabetic for a while. We have to really fortify his kidneys. And then, testosterone on a 767 scale at 578 is not half bad. I mean, he's making way too much sexual hormone binding globulin, which is probably due to all the stress he's under. But otherwise, he's got a lot to work with here. He can get well relatively quickly. His estrogens are kind of, for me, when you combine them, kind of high relative to what testosterone he's got. So you could choose to give him like a diindolylmethane to try to burn some of that off. Now this is based on his scoring. So how he answered his questionnaire this is totally the ranking on that. And lo and behold, it comes up the same way as the labs. And then, of course, the overall lab values that feed into Triad 1 are also here. And there's quite a few that make sense that it's, adrenals plus blood sugar that are dictating what's going on with his health. And, the others, his homocysteine is elevated, his testosterone is his LDL-P is up some, blood pressure is up some. I think if he really cleans his diet up, he's going to get a lot of improvement. And then, get through this. He's CoQ10 deficient. He probably needs methylfolate because his homocysteine was elevated, so I doubt he's on any methylfolate. So these are pretty well covered. All right, next. Where do you start with this guy? Well, I'll tell you what, he's not sleeping and he's stressed out. So you start with Brown. And you probably can get by without the thyrostasis, right? If you were going to make a judgment call, you'd say, I think I'm going to give this guy some adrenal support. I'm going to calm down his stress, get him a lot of magnesium on board, and then use something that's really good for blood sugar support. And then get his vitamin D up, probably change his diet around, and most likely give him CoQ10 because of a statin. And that's it. So, you got about 6 recommendations that you'll start off out of here, most of them in the brown, a few of them in the blue, which is your kind of top 2 triads anyway. So, and you could think of Restore T. I probably wouldn't start there because his testosterone wasn't that bad. But he was binding it up a lot. So I try to get his stress levels down, get his insulin resistance down, see if you don't get that sexual hormone binding globulin to go down. Is Age Garlic a good call for him? I like it because it helps with blood pressure. I like it because it helps remodel lipids, reduces oxidized LDL. So I think that's a great strategy if you wanted to go into something into the green, into cardiopulmonary. The way we've got this laid out, you could do a pretty good job of picking what you need here, right? So Age Garlic or Kyolic being the 3rd triad, and then Renipat 4th. It's because his renal numbers weren't that great. And I'd probably encourage you, if you've got somebody and they're not scoring really high, but they're like in the 60s with their GFR, think about giving them something like Renipat to help support the kidneys, especially in his instance because he's diabetic. So, when you look at this, what were we giving him? Yeah, could he use fish oils? Of course. Could he be on a multi? Of course. And I think those are probably good calls for him. Does he need to be on Flora? Without a doubt, he's going to need to be on Flora. that ultra glucose control powder, that's got some nutrients in it, but that's mainly super starch, and that can be used kind of as a meal replacement, actually, or at least a meal support. Then if he's not belching, bloating, having problems with digestion, you don't need to have the Spectrazine. And then getting him to sleep is really important, so just start with using the mag-glycinate and the melatonin in order to get his nervous system down and get him sleeping. And this is an interesting case because he didn't feel all that great. He felt kind of tired, but he was still pretty functional. But I can tell you that the Glutarate 4 with the beta-thiamine, PQQ, and alpha-lipoic acid, it's going to help his blood sugar receptors, his glucose receptors and insulin receptors beautifully. And so that's why and that's going to mean better recognition of the insulin that he's injecting, and therefore, progression of issues related to insulin go down. So that's basically our case.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We'll see if we have questions come through. And we do have a hand up. I will
Okay, good.
Yep, I'm gonna unmute John.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, John.
Hi. Got a question about the well, you mentioned taking magnesium. Would that affect the kidneys at all if he's got issues with kidneys? I mean, should you?
Magnesium generally doesn't, especially if you're alkalinizing him. So you want to watch his pH, because the biggest thing that creates these diabetics to have their kidneys fail is an acidic pH in their urine. So just watch their pH of their urine while you're giving them magnesium. It typically doesn't end up being a problem. He's nowhere like in renal failure or anything, but you need magnesium in order to make insulin actually function. So, it's a big cofactor for ATP production and glucose regulation. So I wouldn't be concerned with him if his GFR was in the 40s and he had a nephrologist and you were looking at what his magnesium status was, then start dialing it in and worrying about it. But all that's going to happen, these kind of people, and where he's at, I'm actually going to improve his renal function. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, with improving the insulin receptor, with using aged garlic to get some vessel dilation and endothelial pliability, get the blood flow to the kidneys back a bit, and with some glutathione, his kidneys are going to, like the Renopat that's there, fantastic for supporting kidney function. So yeah, we would go after it with this individual. The more they could get the renal failure, a little bit different.
Okay. Question two. Last week's talk, you mentioned, I think there was an issue where there was it was a high calcium in the blood, and you went through some mechanisms saying it might affect the cholesterol level. If you have high calcium in the blood like that, would it trigger investigating about a parathyroid, for example? And
of course. Yeah, if it's high, like that one wasn't out of bounds. It was just like, I think it was a 10-1 or something like that, so it was high normal. And what you really, once you go out of bounds, sure, look at parathyroid. But what I was talking about specifically was the fact that when people are under chronic stress and they lose bone mineral density, you'll see their serum calcium start to go up, and that'll mirror with their blood pressure going to like 130/90. They're getting insulin resistant, they're getting endothelial damage, and of course, as soon as they're beginning to melt their bone down and their serum's going up and their percent monocytes are elevated, well, that's the perfect opportunity for plaquing. I think that's the point I was kind of making with that, was that it's not about the cholesterol itself, it's about the fact that in the presence of that high cortisol person who's got a high serum calcium, their endothelium is getting leaky, the calcium is there, the monocytes are triggering the macrophages, and you're bubbling up this perfect storm. But yeah, if you get an abnormal calcium, yeah, you got to look at parathyroid. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Then one other issue I know, one of my patients was living in the gas area. I mentioned this yesterday. And what happened was we got the report back and started working on it, and nothing seemed to work that well, but we didn't know about the gas. So kind of threw things off, trying to figure it out and then going, well, you're getting the best stuff here. I don't understand why it's not working. So
right. Well, I mean, that means that it may mean that they need detox first, right, to open it up, and then everything else will go now that you know that.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Appreciate that today.
Oh, good. Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Well, it looks like that is going to wrap it up for this evening's questions. Thank you, Jim, for reviewing the case. I recorded tonight's session and we'll post it to the Metabolic Code blog within 24 to 48 hours for review.
Very good.
Thank you.
You.
Have a great night.
Yeah.